So, guys, today I want to review the book Come Winter, and it is the sequel to the movie Last Summer and the book Last Summer. And it's written by Evan Hunter. And for those who don't know who Evan Hunter is, he wrote The Blackboard Jungle, and that's also a very famous movie. It was actually the first film Sidney Poitier was in, which launched his career. And I do want to just mention, too, that, this video does talk about sexual assault and rape myths. So this is definitely going to be very disturbing. And then also, I want to admit that I've not finished the book Last Summer. I'm not finished the book Come Winter. It's definitely a very poorly written book, and there's a lot of things that I don't like about this book. But I plan to finish it, so this may be a part one. This video is just a part one because I want to get all my feelings and thoughts because I was listening to a bulk of this on audio. So, for those who don't know about Last Summer is a coming of age story about four teenagers, David, Peter, Sandy, and Rhoda. And what happened is that they have a great time together, and the three of them have a great time together, and then they meet Rhoda, and then they start hanging out with her, teach her how to swim, and talk about some hard stuff in their lives. And then also Sandy, Peter, and David are people who get themselves into trouble a bunch of times. Like they're kind of like a trio of people. And what happens at the end of Last Summer is that they sexually assault Sandy, and I'm not sure if this happens in the book Last Summer, but in the movie, um, no, in the book in Come Winter, it's alleged that they were drinking and that's why they did it. But in the movie, what happens is that Sandy, Peter, and David are really angry with Rhoda because Rhoda's kind of like Rhoda just like Rhoda is just angry that Sam takes out her breasts, and they all kind of felt like maybe Rhoda needs to be put in her place for always just being so conservative, and then just like maybe feeling like she's better than Sandy, or maybe feeling like she's better than Sandy because she doesn't like sexually put herself out or understand that they have like a three-way romance with each other. So they sexual assault Sandy in both the movie and the book Last Summer. And in the movie Last Summer, it's very very graphic because it's actually Peter and Sandy holding her legs open, and David's actually the one who commits the rape. Like you see his naked body on top of her, and Sandy, no, and Rhoda like twitching when it happens, and then at the end you kind of see this camera shot of them all just grabbing their sand buckets, and just walking away while Rhoda is left in the woods with her eyes closed, um, possibly just like overwhelmed by what happened, or and then also just overwhelmed by what happened, both the sexual act and then also the psychological pain she's gonna have to live with the rest of her life. So, in Come Winter, it's really the whole movie is first person. It is David's narrative, and once again, David is the person that raped. No, it's Peter's narrative. Peter um, is the person that raped her, and it's definitely very very intense because with what happens with Peter, David, and Sandy is that they go on a skiing trip, and even though that they're in their 20s, they still kind of act like young teenagers. Like Sandy still is a parka, and Peter is yeah, and Peter like lives in New York City, so like he's studying to be a psychologist, and David is studying to be a musician, and they're both working on their success. It's like it seems like David's career as a musician may take off. Um, Sandy, I don't remember what she. I don't remember what she does, but she's into traveling, and she's also really really into skiing. And Peter is really into becoming a psychologist. And the first part of the book is very badly written because what happens is that is that when you listen to the audio, there's a bunch of Jewish characters and there's a bunch of German characters. So they do like these very annoying, nasally, wannabe Woody Allen Jewish accents, and they hang out with this like Jewish guy that wants to learn how to ski. So it's a stereotypical, Jewish person who's nerdy, geeky, can't do skiing very well, and needs to learn, even though he's kind of like in his 40s or whatever, how to ski good. And it kind of makes you think of like Woody Allen or Kyle from South Park, like Kyle from South Park's brother, no cousin, who has that very very stereotypical, very like nerdy Jew or stereotype. And then also, in the second part, they meet this woman, and I think it's named Margaret, I believe. And what happens is that she's like this big woman that looks a lot like Sandy. And what happens is that she's very very anti-Semitic, and there's a scene where Peter, Sandy, and David, Sandy gets hit on by a bunch of Texans, and Peter and David seem to break their balls a lot, so it looks like they're about to get their asses kicked. But this woman, like Margaret, kind of comes in and just says like, oh well, they're actually friends with those Texan people, so they kind of drop their frustrations with those two. And I think that when you look at the book, the best part about that whole book is that it that we see Peter in therapy, and he definitely talks about the rape of Rhoda and his feelings about it. Like he has nightmares about it, and I believe one of his nightmares is that he's told to look in a bag or look in an item, and he's afraid to do so, but he has to. His psychologist says, why did you rape Rhoda? Because he uses the word we a lot because he's the one who engaged in the act, and he says things like, Sandy is a woman. I mean, he says to himself, Sandy is a woman, and she was there when Rhoda got raped. So because she is a woman, she can tell you that Rhoda wasn't raped. And one thing he also says, and I don't remember if this is in psychology or this was actually his first, here this is his thoughts, but he also said that Rhoda was drinking Heineken, so she knew what she was getting herself into. She didn't have the choice to, she had the choice or not to come follow them into the woods. And it's definitely very disturbing because even though I haven't finished it, there is a lot of just, those rape myths. If a woman is drunk, it's her fault. If a woman is raped and you have a female around you that watches the rape and they have the choice of saying it wasn't rape because they know how girls react or think, other girls react and think. And then also him just really, really diminishing it. And I think that I might have told you guys in another video that when I was reading the book Midnight Cowboy, I know when I was watching the film Midnight Cowboy, I did my research because what was supposed to happen is that there was a character that gets raped and she is so messed up she accidentally blames her boyfriend and even though they show you like flashbacks and they don't really explain it, what's supposed to happen in that film is that he is falsely accused of rape, and his option was to go to jail or Vietnam. So there was definitely, even legally, even by law in America, that there was a lot of rape myths, and there was a lot of just, okay, if it happens, you look at you diminish it, and and you can go to the military instead of going to jail. And I think there's also a huge mentality that they all have of just really really burying the whole thing. And I think what makes this book really just disturbing is that you still like them as characters because they're just like, grown people acting like teenagers. And I think the huge weakness of this film, of this whole book, is really that Rhoda does not appear yet. I've not read the whole thing, but I'm almost like 75% way through the book, and really the whole book is based on the hype of the book is what does Rhoda do, because honestly, if she does appear at the end of this piece and gets her revenge or confronts them, you would have a very powerful story because you're automatically seeing the psychology of three people who engaged in a sexual assault, and that's it, and you want to get to see them get their comeuppance. But it does feel like that classic saying from The Simpsons, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? Meaning, in literature, when are you going to get to the payoff? And I do think that what could happen is that she could never appear in the book, and life can go on, or maybe just like in the movie Kill Bill, this almost feels like, imagine if Kill Bill 2 was solely focused on Bill, and then the last scene you get Uma Thurman and Bill. Like, it kind of almost feels like that, where you're almost like, is she gonna come? Is she gonna come? We don't see it. Now we're gonna see it at the super end, and I'm very interested to see how Evan Hunter puts it together. But I do think that there's a lot of things in this book that I really think that honestly it should have been like one chapter, every other chapter should have been about Rhoda and what she's dealing with and what she wants to do. Like, either she wants to kill them, or she wants to bring them to justice, or she wants to make an apology, wants them to apologize, or she has a bunch of friends and she wants to kind of like say, like, this happened to me, maybe we should do something to Sandy to get back at her. Like, how is Rhoda going to make closure, or what is Rhoda's next step? And that has to carry out. Or even if you did something like she moves on with her life and she wants to, and she spends the whole book processing, she wants to move on with her life and have nothing to do with them. And then every other chapter is really this story where it's about Sandy, David, and Peter living their lives, and the end result of come winter happens, whether they meet Rhoda or not. I think it'll have been a way masterfully stronger piece. And a lot of people were very upset during the 70s because they liked Last Summer. A lot of people really liked that movie, but they kind of wanted a sequel, since there was a sequel, and this is the sequel. But the book really, really just focuses on Sandy, Peter, and David, and they really, and it really feels like a slice of life. What is their every day? And I really think that 75% of the book, there really is no character development. It's just really them on ski trips, meeting interesting people, and ultimately they all kind of have a agreement that Rhoda was not raped, and it was her fault for what happened because she chose to be in the woods with them, and then she was also drunk. So there's a sense of personal responsibility, but also diminishing responsibility. The next thing that I have to say is that that I think that it is brilliant writing, because it is brilliant writing in the sense of talking about like how there's people who do some horrible things to others, and sometimes they live their lives without taking responsibility, or they diminish it in their head. Like, obviously at this time, there were a lot of Japanese officers and SS officers during World War II that were either being caught, or sometimes there were interviews with them and they're kind of like, I was following orders, and this and that, like the psychology of people who are not taking responsibility for their actions. And then also, this is 1973, I think this was published, so this was when Clockwork Orange came out. And if you saw the movie, one of the criticisms of the movie is that how they don't really put a lot of attention on Alex victims, but the movie was a first person narrative, so obviously Alex is a sociopath. That's very, very clear. So obviously, this is the mindset of a sociopath. He's not going to think about the people that he hurt. These people are not sociopaths, they're just very, very close friends. And I think that they almost don't want to disband because they probably know that once the issue of Rhoda comes to light, that their friendship is over, because it's like, where do you go from there? Because they all engaged in something very, very horrible. This if this was like the newspapers and they went to jail, obviously they would never see each other again, and their parents would never let, because it was 16 when they did this, so their parents would never let them see each other again. And really, I think that honestly they would kind of spend their entire lives, or a majority of their 20s, with this type of relationship that they have. And I think that another thing that's a little interesting about this is that Peter's psychologist thinks that David is gay, and probably hints that maybe Peter is bisexual. But that happened a lot back then, where some psychologists would kind of psychoanalyze people and say that maybe you're gay or whatever, or just analyze his sexuality a lot. And Peter, David, and Sandy do like sleep together, and they both have sex with Sandy, so they're not like having sex with each other. It's just like a girl preferring to have sex with two guys. That's just really, and there's a really poetic, sex scene in the movie. No, poetic sex scene in the book. But I do feel like, that I'm definitely gonna try to make time to review this again. I'm super busy. I was able to hear most of the Audible, but it's definitely a very hard thing to listen to, because first of all, a lot of the narration is very annoying, because it opens with this guy. It opens with like this guy trying to imitate Sandy, going down a hill, screaming and yelling and having a good time. So it gets annoying, and then also, Peter imitates his psychiatrist, which has a very strong German accent, and there are Jewish characters that the Audible imitates, and it's all obnoxious. So you have a lot of obnoxious voices, and also like a lot of these characters that they're introducing in this piece, like the new ones, they're very, very forgettable, and they're more really annoying. And then also like these two cowboys, they're from Arizona, so they have very stereotypical voices and a dumb Texan type of voice. So I'm not sure if Rhoda appears at the end, but that's kind of really what this book is based on. So technically, if you never heard of Last Summer, and then you read Come Winter, you probably think it's one of the worst books ever written. And then also too, if you've watched Last Summer or read Last Summer, you'd probably be very, very frustrated, because I think one of the reviews said that if you read the book 200 pages in, there's no Rhoda. So I think that, again, the suspense is really, will Rhoda come and get her revenge? And I don't think that's going to happen. And maybe one of those books that swerve you, and that swerve you saying, oh, well, she's not there. This book is really more of a study of how bad people are, the end. So you may feel kind of ripped off. Or maybe Rhoda does come at the end and it's done in an anticlimactic way. Or Rhoda comes in the end and it's dealt with in a great way. Maybe she gets revenge. Maybe she's actually Margaret, because Peter says they do look alike. And maybe Rhoda asks for them to apologize or to accept what happens. Or maybe Rhoda is like bigger and stronger and maybe just bumps them on the ski trail, like goes after them and knocks them off a cliff or whatever to get her revenge. And I think that that would be a very interesting ending. And I think maybe what I would do is a fan fiction of last summer, um, and come winter, just to kind of give you how I would write the story. And I also will say that I think it's kind of a very interesting, what's the word? Juxtaposition, like last summer, come winter, because, like summer is seen as like, when the plants grow, when it's sunny, you know, and also like, in summer the school year starts. So it definitely, there's a lot of themes of youth and beauty, and winter's like a lot of themes of death. A lot of older people die in winter. A lot of like even younger people die in winter. It's the end of the year. This takes place towards the end of the year, around Christmas time. So, and also like winter, old man winter. There's a sign of maturity. So there's a lot of just, I like that kind of that theme of like light of like, the youth in the first one and death in the second one. Maybe death, maturity, aging, younger people, 16-year-olds now, people in their early 20s. So it's interesting. And I also think that, if you were to make this into a movie, it wouldn't have a lot of appeal, because Last Summer was like the perfect movie for 1969, because even though, because it was really about rebellious teenagers, but the rape scene kind of ruined the whole movie. But it worked for the summer of '69. But I think that in come winter, it really wouldn't have appeal in the '70s unless you kind of make it like a black exploitation film where it was Rhoda getting revenge. Like honestly, if it was like if it really has to be, if this was written as a revenge novel or a revenge movie, it would be very, very successful. So, I'm off Tuesday, and if I have time, I think that what I would do is, if I do have time, I would just give you guys a fan fiction last summer too. The Revenge of Rhoda, and I'll give you what my version would be. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.